Ladies and gentlemen, Big Hairy News.
Hey, kia ora koutou e te whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Chewie, sir. How are you today?
Kia ora, Pat. I'm good. I'm a good piece of sausage.
People think that we kind of put on a fake show where we're like, oh, look at those guys saying hello, how are you? Like they haven't had a big chat beforehand. It's like, yeah, this is literally the first time I've said to Chewie, how you been today? Because
I mean, there was the 5:30 pre-production meeting, and then the 8 p.m. run sheet go through that we had. We did it before. No, it's all lies. All lies.
Really looking forward to tonight's show. We talked about some of those journalists that we very much respect and value in the country, one of them being Mihingarangi Forbes, and Mata has started again. I didn't even know that Mata had started, but it has been going for a few weeks now. This week's episode featured Erica Stanford talking about education, and in particular Māori education, and what this government's doing to help with the overrepresentation of negative facts and figures surrounding Māori students. So that's going to be an interesting watch. Also, purely by chance, I saw a message from TVNZ today about this little documentary series that John J. Campbell has made about Destiny Church. And the first episode is called something like Women Who Are Afraid of Their Own Church. And it's a really easy watch. We'll give you all the information on how you can find it and watch it over the weekend. It's absolutely weekend viewing, because the episodes are only like 16 or 15 to 20 minutes. And we're going to play. Then one users use that story, that investigative journalism, as a story tonight. So I'm going to play you some of the story from episode 1, from some of the interviews, and we'll play you some of the TVNZ or TV1 news article on that today, and then have a talk about it. And Chewie, one other thing which I haven't advertised at all, I see that the Family Boost scheme is an utter failure. Funny. You know, the Family Boost scheme that was the solution and the answer to 20 hours of free childcare apparently is failing dramatically. Only about half of the people have taken it up that the national government promised would take it up. And I've got no preparation for that, but I noticed there's one news story on that, and it's only a couple of minutes long, so maybe at the end of the show we'll squeeze that in there as well. Of course, tomorrow is Anzac Day. We're going to do a first interview shortly that's going to focus on that. But just before we do that, I want to make an apology that I have been very reticent this week with sharing with you our special drop on the merch store, because this is supposed to stop tomorrow and I haven't mentioned it at all this week. I got caught up in the short week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it's supposed to stop tomorrow. So this is what I've done for you. Obviously, the merch store is all up and running, bhnshop.nz. We showed you all the new stickers and stuff that are all there. Look at that, beautiful stickers. But we've had a merch drop on these buffer rainbow tees, and I haven't mentioned them at all this week. And I apologize, because I know what's going to happen. Next week, I'm going to start to get emails from people going, hey, can we get one of those rainbow buffers again? So what I've done is because honestly, tomorrow being Anzac Day, I could put it in the order tomorrow, but it probably won't make much difference if I put it in tomorrow or first thing on Monday morning. So this is what I'm going to do. Please tell your friends if they're interested in some rainbow buffer merch. And what I've done, if you notice up here, Chewie, is I've dropped the price by 10%. I thought about it. We should do a code, and we should do like we'll say buy one during the show, and I thought, no, we'll just make it 10. So
Codes are hard.
Hoodies $90, and they're normally either 100 or 105 if you're on one of the bigger sizes. Tees as well. Sorry, I meant to go back. T-shirts are down $5 as well, which is 10%, and that's across the range for any size. So they're $50. So if you were one of the people that was asking us about the rainbow buffers, wanting us to bring them back. We've brought them back. I've dropped the ball this week. I'm going to leave them on the store until Monday morning, and then I'll put the order into our supplier for t-shirts to get them printed for you. If you're waiting on one, we're going to be pressing them tomorrow, so you'll get them early next week, the people who ordered last week. I apologize, completely bad on my part. I dropped the ball. I've got no excuses. I blame Chewie mostly, but, you know, it's partly my fault because, you know, I let Chewie come and play with us each night, so I take responsibility for that. Anyway, guys, so sorry about that. bhnshop.nz if you want to get one, and if you know people who wanted them, like I thought I might message a couple of our friends in the community, maybe Sunita, and say, hey, stick the word out there because lots of your people wanted them last time and they haven't been in the store for a while. So that's just so you know that they'll be there for a few extra days. They're cheaper than they'll ever be, and then they'll go away again, and a whole bunch of people will start going, oh, can we have those rainbow buffers again? And they'll be gone again. So done. Right, Chewie, we are going to talk tonight. It's not really a talk about Anzac Day, but it is involving the themes around Anzac Day, especially fascism in the West, in West Europe. And what was happening in and around that world, and what are the origins of fascism. Maybe if there is still an element of fascism happening today, how is it happening today if we're worried about it today? So we want to welcome to the show Professor Mark Seymour, who is from the, do you call it department? Faculty, probably, Faculty of History at the University of Otago. Mark, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Kia ora koutou. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Mark.
Professor Mark Seymour from the University of Otago. So that we'll give the audience everything. This is why someone sent me a little video, which I'm going to play part way through this conversation, which you've seen, Mark, and
Yes.
that caused me to think about the idea of fascism. We hear that word lots at the moment. You know, people used to say go woke, go broke. They're now saying go fash, lose cash, is one that I heard the other day. So this idea about the rise of fascism is in the vernacular at the moment. I guess I wanted to give us an opportunity to learn more about what it is, what it was, and maybe is it something we should be concerned about. So why don't we just start at the beginning, because you're a professor of history and you are sort of have a specialist or certainly a special area of knowledge in the origins of fascism. So we are your students, Mark. Tell us about the origins of fascism.
Oh, well, the origins of fascism as a political theory lie in 20th century Italy, and they emerged just after World War I, when Italy, like most other European countries, was in terrible disarray. Italians felt that liberal democratic politics had left them in a terrible state, and the Bolshevik revolution had just happened up in Russia, and the idea of a sort of Moscow or communist takeover was putting fear into everyone's hearts. And Benito Mussolini came up with what he thought of as he argued was a third alternative to those two main political creeds, and he called it fascism. That was his name for it. And that came from, the word fascism came from an ancient political symbol of authority, and it basically a bundle of rods or sticks wrapped around an axe with the blade protruding somewhat menacingly and tied together incredibly tightly. And it was the very antithesis of democracy and liberal individualism. It was very military in tone. It was about discipline. It was about strength in numbers, about unity, and about aggression. And he applied that sort of theory to a new politics for Italy from 1922 to 1943. So in a nutshell, a tiny nutshell.
Do we know, because I hear that picture that you're painting and I think that sounds horrific. I'd hate the leader of my country to follow that kind of idea because it sounds quite authoritarian. Do we know, were the people of Italy, were they very clear on what it actually was? Or did he kind of get in surreptitiously and then it became more of what it is? Do you know what I mean?
I do. I think that's a really interesting question. And probably both. Mussolini was inventing the ideology as he went along.
Right.
It was brand new, and I don't think he even knew. He had defected from the Socialist Party in 1915, So, but he was a dyed-in-the-wool socialist. He had a lot of very socialist ideas, except he was nationalistic. And socialism isn't nationalistic, believes in the brotherhood of the working classes and so on. But fascism was violent and thuggish and authoritarian on the streets of Italy from 1919 onwards. There wasn't much hiding from that fact. So people knew, but they thought that phase might pass, that, you know, we have to give them a chance, they need to restore order. So they sort of knew and they sort of didn't. And it's very, very hard to say exactly who knew what.
Yeah, because if you knew exactly what it was as you describe it, who would want that? Or if they did want that, if the community did want that, you have to think, what kind of state was your country in? I also just thought, if you, yeah, sorry.
Well, I actually think that's really, really crucial.
Yeah.
And I tried to.
Oh.
We lost him.
Oh, we might have lost Mark. We'll do a countdown for 10 seconds. What I was thinking, Chewie, as Mark's a bit frozen there, was Mussolini went from sort of the far left to the far right as we would look at things, which means that Roger Douglas must be the modern Mussolini, mustn't he? Isn't that basically what he did, from Labour to ACT? Can we officially do that now and say that now?
Roger Douglas is El Duce.
Well, but I mean, you know, in that kind of going from socialism to fascism, I know Douglas would never acknowledge the word socialist, but going from the left to the hard right, there is someone who's done it. While we wait to see what happens with Mark, he may drop off and then re-sign back in. Do you want to add any things to this conversation so far, Joe? You are the kind of amateur historian amongst the two of us, what you've heard so far.
Yeah, so I think this is a really, like, for a lot of people, the belief that fascism was a German thing. The hint is in the name. It absolutely started in Italy, and I'm glad that it's mentioning how much of a seat of the pants movement this was, that they were just making it up as they go along and cribbing things from other things like the socialist movement, the idea of a centralized control and especially the people power and how you communicate to the public was very much taken out of socialist books. But then they were putting their own spin on it. And there were definitely people around the world that were paying very close attention to what was happening.
Yeah.
We know one, Oswald Mosley from the UK and Adolf Hitler were big fans, just really taking down a lot of notes at that stage. So all of this happened in a very sort of haphazard way, very quickly. I think we might have Mark back now.
Welcome back, Mark. We were just using that's right. The amateur historian Chewie was just giving us a rundown as well. So where you dropped out, if you weren't aware, was I said, what kind of state would the country have had to have been in, you know, to if they were going along with this authoritarian idea?
And that was precisely it. You said, why would anyone go for that? And I think that is really a sign that the country was in dire straits. Italy had sort of won the war, but they'd been offered a lot of land around the Eastern Adriatic if they went into the war on the side of Britain and France. They did do that. Then President Wilson came to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919 and said, oh, no, none of that. You're not getting anything. And people felt that, you know, they'd lost their sons and fathers for nothing. The economy was in dire straits. The left-wing unionists were sort of getting instructions from Moscow and causing havoc. And there was this sense that the country was about to collapse, and Mussolini posed as a savior. And a bit like Trump's tariffs, you know, oh, we have to go through a bit of pain, but, you know, just trust me, it's all going to be fine type thing.
It is always, I mean, maybe I'm doing it's a bit of a long bow here, but how often the West seems to contribute to these outcomes, which then the West has to fight back against. If you're saying that, you know, the Americans said, no, there'll be nothing from us, and they were left a bit more destitute, I'm thinking straight away about like the CIA arming Al-Qaeda sort of thing to fight the Russians, and then it came back and they did be used against them. It's like how much of a hand does the West have to put up for these sorts of changes in philosophy or policy of other parts of the world that then come back to bite the West?
Yeah, That's right. I mean, historians nowadays would agree that the arrangements at the Paris Peace Conference after World War I really just were a sort of waiting room for World War II. And I heard Chewie was talking about Hitler, who came to power about 11 years after Mussolini, but really on the back of the settlement that Germany had been dealt as a result of World War I.
Chewie, you ask a question. This is your bag more than mine. I won't get in and dominate the time. Sir, it's yours.
One of the things that I was saying, hopefully you caught it while you're offline there, was that there seems to be a common parallel with how you communicate with the public, that things are going wrong, the establishment aren't doing things correctly, this is why your life sucks. And I'm the only one that knows a way out, because I'm not one of those guys. I'm not part of the establishment. Follow me, I will make things better. And then finding a scapegoat seems to be very much a pathway. Was that echoed in Italy? Was that blueprinted in Italy and then echoed in Germany later?
I think so, actually, too. Yes. You know, the Nazi version of fascism has somehow, made Italian fascism seem relatively benign. And I suppose compared with the Holocaust, it was. But I think Mussolini really pioneered that system, and all the things you said at the beginning. You've been shafted by your government, and this is why your life sucks. Trust me, I'm the one who knows. This sort of blind faith in the leader. That was a leadership and governing style that Mussolini really pioneered, and I think Hitler took a leaf straight out of his copybook. And we see similar sorts of things today, even though on average people are far, far, far better informed, or have the potential to be.
Yeah. Maybe we could move into the today thing. So you wrote a piece for Newsroom. We'll let people see the piece in case they want to go check it out for themselves. Q&A with you. Should we be worried about a fascism comeback? And I know that you said that Newsroom supplied the questions and then you had a limited number of words to kind of reply the answer to. But one of the questions that you were asked, that you answered, which I'd like to cover off on now, is what does fascism look like in today's world? I mean, as I said, we hear lots of buzzwords that get thrown around, whether it's Nazi or fascist or what Antifa or whatever it is. When this word gets used in 2025, fascism, what does actual fascism look like in 2025?
So I think real, genuine, historic fascism hasn't really been seen in the world since World War II. I think in the post-war years, it became a sort of byword for anyone dictatorial or authoritarian, right, with sort of right-wing tendencies. So I think it's, in a sense, that the true historic meaning of the word has been devalued, and it's used in a very generic sense. But Trump arriving on the scene has started a new sort of debate about whether this is a recrudescence of fascism, and I think that's a really interesting possibility. I thought it shows early warning signs, and that's a sort of pre-quote of your little TikTok video.
Should we do that? Should we do that now? Let's do that now, eh?
Yeah, let's.
So I came across this, someone sent this, actually someone made a comment to one of our YouTube clips, Chewie, with this and said this may be of interest. So this is a talkback host on LBC in the UK. We're going to miss the first couple of words, but she's basically saying, Nick has sent me the text, and they're annoyed with how she's sort of referring to the US administration or some of the ongoings as fascism. And this is what she says.
Has texted in repeatedly to tell me how cross he is with me for describing the US administration, the current US administration, as far right. So I'm going to read for you. The Holocaust Museum displays a poster which says early warning signs of fascism. I'm just going to read them to you, and you can tell me which of these you don't think applies to Trump. Powerful and continuing nationalism, disdain for human rights, identification of enemies as a unifying cause, supremacy of the military, rampant sexism, controlled mass media, obsession with national security, religion and government entwined, which is what we're talking about this hour, corporate power protected, labour power suppressed, disdain for intellectuals and the arts, obsession with crime and punishment, rampant cronyism and corruption.
So that's from the Holocaust Museum, and the question, and obviously the question the host is saying is, if we can't speak of the Trump administration in this way, if they tick all these boxes, what else is it? And look, another thing, actually, sorry, Mark, before we go on, is I wonder how many of those boxes will also be ticked by either New Zealand First or ACT. I don't think they tick all of them, but there are several in there that I kind of go, defunding RNZ, that kind of stuff. But there's a few. But there you go, Mark. That's the video that's kind of sparked this whole conversation.
Yeah. I mean, here what happens is that you find out that even though I've worn a baseball cap and a hoodie, I am actually a professor of history and I'm an academic and I'm very fussy. So you might have noticed that she began by saying, Nick is really cross with me for describing Donald Trump as far right.
Yep.
Didn't say fascism, she said far right.
True. Yep.
And then she said, here's the Holocaust Museum's definition of early warning signs of fascism. So she's already done what I said, which is conflate fascism with far right. But the other thing is that comes from a poster that was written in 2003 by a political commentator in the United States. It has nothing to do with the Holocaust Museum, except that the gift shop allegedly sold it. But she's passing it off as a really, authoritative institution's definition. It is not that. It is one business scholar's idea that, he wrote in 2003. So pardon me for sort of just investigating that document, but I needed to know what I was dealing with. I think he makes a lot of interesting points. I don't think it's a load of nonsense at all, but it is not an authoritative statement from the Holocaust Museum in the United States. What I think a definition of fascism could be much simpler than those 14 points, and I basically said that the things that distinguish fascism are its insistence on a constant national rebirth. It's what the scholar Roger Griffin called palingenetic nationalism, constant rebirth. And you could see Make America Great Again as an ideal example of that, the rebirth of something that has been somehow held back and held down by corrupt, East Coast elites. A totally religious faith in the leader to know the way. And you mentioned that, Chewie, earlier on. And, I mean, you could probably say that about communism in Soviet Russia, those two things. But the other thing is that they really believe in the reinforcement of existing social hierarchies, which communism didn't. So that's a relatively simple idea, but to me, those are the distinguishing features of fascism. And looking at, say, Trump's America, I think you can see some of those things emergent. The question is whether the social structure and the institutional structure is strong enough to resist them. And if you look at Harvard fighting back and so on, there's much more fight in American institutions than there was in Italian systems in 1922.
There seems to be more fight from the institutions for this Trump term, whereas in the last Trump term, there seemed to be more fight from what they refer to as the adults in the room. There seemed to be people with Trump that were pushing back more, and now there seems to be no one with Trump. But some, as you say, Harvard, the institutions are kind of going, yeah, we're going to push back now. So,
well, they're being much more directly attacked than they were last time as well. So they have to fight back or die.
Yeah. Chewie.
Yeah, my concern with where America is at the moment is that this hasn't happened all of a sudden. It's happened very, very quickly over the past year. But this has been a process of decades. And when I think about the tendencies of fascism, the things that people cling to. It almost seems like America's been about half in the bag since before World War II, and it's almost like the way that World War II played out is postponed things. There was an excellent comment. I don't know if I actually started. No, I didn't because I'm a dummy. So sorry, whoever said it. Brilliant point. Was post World War II America did a really good job of making Nazism and fascism seem very evil. They did a very bad job of making it seem unappealing. So the flags, the uniforms, the rallying behind the nationality, the belief in, the oath, all of that sort of stuff, and the preeminence of their military and America's place in the world is naturally number one. All the hard work's been done. You just need someone to nudge it. And I think the Republican Party has been heading that way consciously or unconsciously for the last 40 years.
And so what you're saying is we've got a sort of perfect storm here where we now have a set of social conditions where the people are willing to go that way as well, because obviously for the last 40 years they haven't.
It's kind of that slow progression. Like, this is nothing to be alarmed about. This is nothing to be alarmed about. This is nothing to be alarmed about. And then you're in a place where, oh shit, this is alarming. I think there's a lot of people in the States that are looking at where they are and going, how did this happen?
All right. So, yeah, okay. Well, let's accept that. But which of you just said something about New Zealand first, answering to some of those 14 points? Think about how quickly the social fabric, the sort of compact, the Team New Zealand togetherness frayed towards the end of Jacinda Ardern's terms. I don't think you'd ever say that had been being prepared, for the last 40 years in New Zealand society. So it might be true in America, but I think these things can turn very it's they can turn on a dime, as Americans might say, even if the ground hasn't been prepared. So I'm not sure that it's been a sort of slow march towards fascism in the States for the last 40 years. I can see your argument, but I'm not ready to buy it yet, Chewie.
but equally, that was a very fast turn at the end of Jacinda Ardern's term.
Yes.
But we're not today where America is today, so we haven't then continued on. Like, I remember someone saying once in a very oversimplified way, kind of first comes patriotism, then comes nationalism, then comes fascism. And they were talking about America's in that nationalistic. We're lucky in New Zealand because we're patriotic about nothing, nowhere, never. So we're not going to worry about that chart. But America seems to be teetering on the edge of that beyond patriotism, internationalism. What's next?
So, so what I think I'm hearing from you is that you both think that America for the last 40 years has been a sort of crypto-fascist or proto-fascist, sort of waiting for the right circumstances.
I think what I wonder about America, I'm just a rodeo clown from the bottom of the South Island, but what I wonder about America is, did George W. Bush somewhat prepare the way for Donald Trump? Did Donald Trump term 1 somewhat prepare the way for Donald Trump term 2? And people keep saying, this is not Reagan's Republican Party. They're equally saying in New Zealand, this is not John Key's National Party. Is there just incremental movement? You could easily argue, I guess, people on the other side might say this is not David Longie's Labour Party. Is there incremental movement always for every party in a particular direction? And are American parties on the right heading in that direction, so they're closer today than they were in the early thousands, when they were in the 80s, and there has been a creep?
I mean, as a historian, I'm a great believer in creep and increment. History is one day after the other, and it's the accretion of all those hundreds of days and those gentle forces that create earthquakes. It's a bit like fault lines or something.
Yeah.
So there have been stresses on the fault lines of American society, absolutely no doubt, as Chewie says, since World War II. But something has happened. Something has happened, and I'm not quite sure what. I haven't been to the States. I mean, I did my PhD in the States. I lived there for several years, so I got a great sense of it as a very open, very welcoming, anything goes, be your individual self, we will pay for your education. As an amazing sort of leader of the free world, that was my experience of it. I didn't see anything like this, Chewie, coming in my 4 years of living in the United States.
And I think I'll clarify my point here a little bit as well. I'm certainly not saying that this is like a plan. I don't think that this is something that, like, if we just move very, very slowly, we can get to our goal, which is fascism. I think through a case of just democratic short-sightedness that it's happened. It's like, we've got to beat the Democrats. And this is how we're going to do it. And it's other things that have happened along the lines, like the intense militarization of their police came from a post 9/11 world. Was a big part of setting up the conditions for where they find themselves now. You know, they had all of this military equipment after the Gulf War. What do we do with it? Give it to the police. You know, there was an erosion of people's rights around how they were monitored and how they were policed and all of that
Patriot
sort of stuff.
Act.
The Patriot Act was, thank you, Pat. I was trying to grab it out of my brain and I couldn't do it. All of these things, none of these things, I think, were a conscious thing of like, that'll get us closer to fascism. I think if you pointed it out to people at the time, they would have very strenuously argued that that's absolutely not what they wanted to do. But nonetheless, it's another piece of the puzzle, and it's another tool in the tool chest for these guys that are around Trump and Trump to go, we could use this.
I was gonna say, look, I don't think Trump is ever going to make sense when you look at him in the eyes of history. But in saying that, if you buttressed Trump up against Reagan, you'd be like, what the fuck is this? But if you went Reagan, G.W. Bush, W. Bush, Trump, it still doesn't make sense. Trump still doesn't make sense. He's such an outlier, but it makes more sense of how they got there.
I'm glad Chewie mentioned 9/11. Because I think events create other events. You know, they're unforeseen shocks that can knock a party that's on course A slightly onto course B or slightly further to the right. And I think the Patriot Act was a result of that. And I think a lot of those shifts in the Republican Party after 9/11 were very much to do with that incredible shock. I left the States after my PhD about 1 week before, on the 24th of August, 2001.
Wow.
And I know the place was different when I went back there, really, really different. So I think events are really, I'm a historian, so obviously I think
that's interesting.
Things aren't planned, but you get a very, very complex combination of particular personalities, particular, as the Germans say, zeitgeist, sort of feelings of the time, particular events, and that's what historians try and unravel. We're not that great at unraveling the present.
And look, Mark, speaking of the present, you've got a family engagement in your house, so we'll let you go with one last question, if that's okay. As a historian, as someone who talks about the origins of fascism, how do you see Anzac Day? What do you think of Anzac Day? How do you commemorate, remember the day that we all kind of pause and think?
Well, you're going to get me into trouble here. I see Anzac Day as a sort of nationalist ferment, and I don't like it because I don't like nationalism and I don't like celebrating war. I fully acknowledge the sacrifice of those who go to war, but I don't like the glorification of war that's wrapped into Anzac Day. So I wouldn't say I boycott it, but it isn't something that I celebrate.
That's why I did use the word commemorate, because I think anyone who celebrates Anzac Day, that's a bit of a strange thing there as well. But look, great. Thank you for that. Appreciate your thoughts. Professor Mark Seymour, we'll let you get back to your visiting brother now from the University of Otago. Thanks so much for a really interesting chat. We appreciate your time.
Great to talk to you. Thanks for inviting me. Bye.
All the best.
Thanks. I was going to mention a weird little clip that I saw the other day, which was, I think, a contemporary interview with George W. Bush. When you talk about how the Republican Party would be unrecognizable to itself.
Yeah.
And definitely the clip that I watched was framed as if George W. Bush had some prescient knowledge of the future and the dangers of Donald Trump. But he was going on about, if you look at history, then we must be aware of falling into the traps of isms, nationalism, isolationalism, all of that sort of thing. So, I mean, you can see that in America's history in the past. They were isolationist going into World War II. They had big Nazi rallies. Like, we've all seen the pictures of the Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden and that sort of thing. You know, there were people in America that were looking at European fascism and going, these might be some good ideas. So I think the idea of America holding itself up as a beacon of freedom and liberalism, I think they have been a bad weekend away from sliding into fascism for most of this century. Or, sorry, most of last century, I should say.
It was fascinating. I had never thought about that before, even that one little act, the Patriot Act. Because at the time, there were some Bernie Sanders, I remember, who was like, this is not okay. And like one or two people kind of voted against it, and everyone else, of course, because it was a time of war, and you know, you support your leader, went along with it, and that could have been the opening of the door. I mean, you talk about unrecognizable. I mean, you go one step further, buttress bloody Trump up against Abraham Lincoln. Your head would explode.
Yeah, look, 9/11 was such a shift in the States, and politicians of every party over there were crawling over themselves to be seen as the most patriotic. You know, that whatever it takes, whatever measures, we've got to stand together. We've got to punish the people that did this to us. There was no handbrake there. There was no person standing up going, hang on, maybe we need cooler heads here. Yes, this is horrible, but let's just take a minute and make some good decisions. It just didn't happen. So yeah.
We've got a bunch of super chats to get there, but before we do that, I'll just start a bunch of conversations around the Anzac Day, the end of that conversation. Jeff says, lest we forget Archie Baxter. I think it's Vicky, isn't it? I understand how Mark feels. As a transplanted Yank, I don't have any relationship to Anzac Day. Great interview. Rupert says, and a time to remember the sacrifice of veterans both alive and now gone. And Flynn, who says, he teaches my modern Italy paper this year at Otago Uni. Great progressor. I think we know what you're saying. I'm taking the piss a little bit.
On his comments on Anzac Day, I haven't missed a dawn service since I was 15. I've traveled the world and gone to places that New Zealanders have fought overseas. Has often been a touchstone of where I've traveled to. It's obviously really, really important to me. I hold it up when compared to other commemorations, like America has Veterans Day, Armistice Day in the UK, all of that sort of thing. The thing that I sort of cling to, because I'm not yay war, it's a celebration, all of this sort of stuff. It's not. For me, it's a mourning. Like there are two touchstones for me in the commemoration of Anzac Day. It's to look at the horror and the waste of World War I. The trap that people fell into was that nationalism, the jingoism. We fight for king and country, all of the big adventure overseas, and it was just horror. People threw young New Zealand lives away, and that's why we remember. That's why the phrase is "lest we forget." lest we forget or we'll do this all again.
It is different, because you see in those times as well when people had no idea of what they were going to, their touchstone for war were comic books and patriotism and, you know, go over there and give them a good slapping sort of thing. And then they went there. And I mean, obviously, none of us have been in anything like that kind of situation. The closest I think we can do is maybe watch a very well-made video or documentary, documentary on, for example, Gallipoli. And when you see it done accurately, you're like, what the fuck? If anybody had have known what they were walking up to, there would have been no volunteers. Whereas today, I'm interested because today, now this could just be Trump, because Trump just lies always, saying the other day that the uptake to become a member of the military forces is up significantly in America. And I do wonder if that is true, now that we all have a much clearer idea as to what war's all about. Under a Trump presidency, if that's true, what does that say about the people joining up? What does that say about American society? I'll probably Google it while you comment to see if it is true or not, because he could just be full of shit. He does that so often.
The other theme that runs through Anzac Day for me is obviously World War II, which couldn't be more different from World War I if it tried. It was a struggle against an almost cartoonishly evil bad guy, and just seems, by its difference, a more righteous struggle. And then I'm not saying we went to war because we knew what was happening to the Jews, but certainly at the end of it, when you find out the true horrors of what was going on inside Nazi Germany, it seems like a very justified struggle. And I think a lot of countries cling to that of like, this is the one that we were the white hats, the good guys, and we've stood up for international freedom and that sort of thing. And that kind of held the world together for a while. A lot of bad shit happened under that justification. Absolutely. The Cold War had a lot of nasty shit going on. We're propping up fucking bad guys and dictators, and New Zealand has never 100% got it right. You know, we for every Korea, we had a Malayan emergency. We had our involvement in Vietnam and that sort of thing. But I think by having a day like this and anchoring it around the landings at Gallipoli, I think this is the only war commemoration that centers around a loss. It isn't like this is the time that we took the mountain and we won the day. This is the day that we invaded somebody else's country and got our fucking asses kicked. And that's what it is to me. Like it's understanding the reasons why we did what we did, right or wrong. And it's recognizing, I guess, what people can do. Again, good or bad. Yeah. You know, for every heroic story, there's one of somebody coming back with no arms and legs, and it's sad. There's nothing heroic in that. And I get really, really touchy when people do make Anzac Day into a jingoistic thing. You know, I stand there and I think, like, I'll go to 3 places tomorrow. I'll be at dawn service at the Cenotaph in Dunedin. I'll go to the Soldiers Memorial out on the peninsula, which, of course, looks out over the harbour where a lot of the troop ships left. And then I will go to the Baxter Memorial, which is a newer memorial here in Dunedin, commemorating a conscientious objector who was subjected to torture.
Yeah, horrific.
You know, that's the thing. Lest we forget means everything. It's not just the heroic stories. It's not just the Charles Uphams and the winning the Victoria Cross. It's the times that New Zealand forces went into a Palestinian village and murdered everybody. We were not the white hats in that example. So you've got to keep that stuff in mind, or you repeat it.
Yeah. We really do have to get some representatives on for the Archibald Baxter story at some stage, because that's a story that I don't think enough New Zealanders know that story. I think that needs to be, we need to know it better. All right. Okay, we're going to keep going now. Thank you for the insights as well, Chewie. Kiwi Bird says Pat and Chewie need a big hairy clock. There's an L in that. You notice
good catch.
You know, when we're late, have you noticed what's been happening? It's always when we've got a guest. Because we're going like this beforehand. So if we're late and we've got a guest, you guys know this now. Oh, yeah, I know what they're doing. Daniel says, late fee, remember folks, be crime, do gay. Peter says, wearing my Chewie fufu as an undershirt today, his anger warms me. Imagine that one.
Yeah, that's not
Vesuvius.
reliable. That's not reliable if you're going to be wearing it at dawn service tomorrow, because it looks fucking cold.
Have you looked at the forecast for Dunedin?
I can feel it, Pat. It's cold.
I can feel it in my bones. I can feel it in my bones. I can. If you're going to want to be warmed, though, really, I mean, you should be wearing that one. Surely that one would make you warmer.
That's so good.
That will make you warmer.
I'm so happy with that. Look, my wife will back me up on this. One of the happiest
It'll be a
times she'll ever see me is when I look in our Discord and find out that I've been memed.
Kiwi Bird wanted to know, is Mark related to David? And then Ryzen comes in with Mark Seymour is greater than David Seymour. So that's a kind of answer to that question. Either way, Peter also says, because fascism is ultra-nationalist, it varies from country to country, although it shares common trends and influences. And Rachel says military sign-ups, maybe they are hungry and homeless. Yeah, maybe. 12.5%, I just found that article straight away. So yeah, it's interesting that people will have a much clearer view of what war looks like today, you know, through mass media. And now they've got Trump in charge. And if the numbers are going up like that, 12.5%, I think even that in and of itself is an interesting commentary of where America's at right now. All of a sudden people want to sign up to fight under Trump. What does that mean? Because there's going to be no rules? Or is it the patriotic thing to do to make sure they keep Trump in check? I don't know. It's interesting dynamic as to why.
I think it comes to, like, the American military has been finding it really hard to recruit for decades now, because they were up to their eyeballs in Afghanistan and Iraq, and people were seeing veterans come back and not be looked after, and it was a struggle. You know, like 20 years in Afghanistan, like that makes a lot of sense to sign up in the wake of the Twin Towers falling, and you're angry and you want to defend your country and go to where the guys that did it lived. 20 years later, like there are people that would have been signing up for the military with it, they grew up in a world where the Twin Towers didn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, they never had it, signing up at 18 and stuff like that. It wasn't seen as appealing. More or less, kind of America's at a peacetime footing now. They don't have as much of an active combat operations overseas at the moment. So at that point, their whole thing of like, well, we'll pay for your college education seems to be a lot more appealing when you can go, well, I can complete my course and not get blown up by an IED in a valley that I can't describe. You know, so I think I would disconnect that from Trump. I don't think a whole bunch of MAGA people are signing up for the military. I could be wrong, but yeah, that's what I think it is.
Very good. Right, we're moving on. Mata with Mihingarangi Forbes is back up and running. I was speaking to some of the producers of Mata today, and when they release that mini doco they're working on around David Seymour, we will get some access to either them or, I mean, hopefully Mihi, but we'll see what happens. Mata is back, though, and Mata is back is a good thing because she is an incredible interviewer, and she is one of these people who just sits and watches and waits and then asks the question that is devastating to whoever the other person is. They've just spent a couple of minutes in this conversation talking about the overrepresentation of Māori children in the negative stats around the school. They then go on to this part of the conversation, which is talking about why are Māori children underperforming or overrepresented in those stats. And this is the Minister of Education and part of that conversation.
What we do know is kura kaupapa Māori and Māori medium education consistently delivers better results. What are they doing that mainstream's not?
That's a really good point, and they do. If you look at the NCEA results, they're doing really well. And, and I dug into those results to make sure that actually, they are doing subjects that you would expect: English, maths, science. These are not being bumped up by unit standards. They're doing, credits in good subjects and getting really good results.
What do you reckon the secret is?
Well, there's a number of things. I mean, the kura kaupapa.
So this is important, in case it's not as clear as it should be, but kura kaupapa Māori and Māori schools. And look, a bit later on, in a different clip I'm going to play, Mihi does say they are the gold standard, and they actually are. So if kura kaupapa and other Māori schools are actually doing better than the mainstream, why are we trying to bring Māori into the mainstream rather than the other way around? It's a little bit like, we have that conversation around they're inviting Māori to the table when we were talking about things like Three Waters, not understanding that the treaty, when it was signed, it was Māori inviting Europeans or the English to the table, and it's been flipped for some way. And I get the sense of this in this conversation. The Minister of Education is talking about helping Māori by bringing them into a non-Māori system, whereas the Māori system is actually outperforming the non-Māori system. It's a very strange merry-go-round they sit on for a while.
The movement has a really strong tie to families. And that's something I've been watching in the kura kaupapa movement, going, actually, there's probably something we need to learn here in the mainstream to make sure that we can implement some of those successful things that kura kaupapa do in the mainstream. We're not going to be able to mirror it exactly. They do have quite a different philosophy. And
let me tell you what Rawiri Wright says. He's a head of Te Rūranganui of Ngā Kura Kaupapa Māori. He says that introducing Mātauranga Māori worldview into mainstream schools will lift achievement for tauira Māori, and that's te reo Māori, tikanga, that's identity, that's history, and as you say, that's whānau as well. He's not alone. Your own website provides exactly the same analysis. So when you cancelled Te Ahu o Te Reo Māori, a Māori language training program for mainstream teachers, did you go against all your own evidence?
No, the evidence is really clear. Structured literacy and structured maths have incredible outcomes for Māori students. That's what the evidence tells us. You can go and talk to BSLA, you can go and talk to any of the schools who use Prime, Maths No Problem, or any of those
and
results.
You're fixing that, and you've reset it, and you're refreshing it, but you've also said that to me that it's not just a couple of drivers, it's multiple.
It is, but as a minister with limited resources, I have to make decisions.
Don't buy that. Ministers do not have limited resources. They have the resources set by Cabinet. They could double those resources tomorrow if they chose to.
Decisions.
So the decision is to remove millions of dollars of funding from teaching te reo Māori and putting it into...
Oh, bit of a pause there. We'll just do a little refresh here. My apologies, whānau. 8:53, we're going to have to come back to 8:53. All right, here we go. Just talk amongst yourselves. We'll just be a few minutes here.
With limited resources, I have to make decisions.
So the decision is to remove millions of dollars of funding from teaching te reo Māori and putting it into a mainstream maths refresh.
Well, in front of me, I had evidence that said literacy and numeracy outcomes for Māori are extraordinary when we put resource into structured literacy and explicit teaching in maths and literacy. $30 million a year that was going into teaching te reo to mainstream teachers. The evidence that I was presented with and I've read shows that there were no tangible outcomes in raising achievement or closing the equity gap. I have got my eye on that. I want to close the equity gap and raise achievement of Māori students, and the way to do that...
You must know better than that. You must know that when you have mainstream teachers that can understand and represent and reflect tamariki Māori in mainstream schools, it's going to be beneficial. I read the report early this morning, the Independent Te Ahu Te Reo. There are so many great outcomes in there. One of them is, this is one that I just read, that the active teachers who participated, 83% of them in the survey reported that Te Ahu o Te Reo Māori had enhanced their professional practice in the schools.
They liked the free thing that they got. Yeah, look, I get that. But actually, where are the results?
What do you mean free? What do you mean free? It's Te Reo Māori. No. It's an official language of this country. Why shouldn't we be teaching them this?
What I'm saying is that what you read this morning is all very well and nice, but what does it mean for student outcomes? Well,
no,
it's not evidence of student outcomes. Where did it say in that
because it
document
hasn't
that
had
you
an
read?
opportunity to be
It's been
be an
going for a
outcome
number
or-
of years.
And this is
I
the
need
evidence.
outcomes for Māori students.
So what
and
about
that's
when
I'm
Rawiri
focused on.
Wright tells you that what's important for Māori tamariki in mainstream schools, because he's worked in both and he's an expert in both, is identity, te reo and tikanga and whanaungatanga and all those kinds of things. You can't just have a curriculum and some resources. It's not working. It hasn't worked for 200 years.
Clip number 1, Joey. The idea of the Minister of Education going, duh, yeah, so they enjoyed the thing they got for free. When, to be clear, what she was talking about was the teachers teaching your kids, your brothers and sisters, your grandchildren, being trained in te reo Māori. And we're going to go on to it with the next clip, this idea of outcomes. And I'm not the kind of person that uses this sort of word, Chewie. Sometimes it feels a bit fluffy and thing, but the outcomes they are talking about are the outcomes of a colonizing race. And we get to that in the next clip, where the only outcomes they can see or grab onto are tangible ones. And I don't know about you at school, Chewie, but I remember at school some of the best outcomes, the best successes I had, were maybe not as tangible as a mark in a ledger, but it was to do with learning and growing. And, you know, it wasn't always the reading, writing and arithmetic. But this government seems to be heavily focused on that and seems to think it is the answer to everything, even though Kura Kaupapa Māori and other areas are saying, actually, this outperforms it and there's a lot more to this system than you guys are wanting to implement. Yeah, it's yours, sir.
I like how Erica has gone from saying some very nice sounding platitudes at the start of the interview to absolutely getting dog walked into a trap. And then you see her personality come out with that comment of like, oh yes, they like the free thing that they got. What a bitchy comment.
Yeah, totally. Real mean girls.
Like, would you say that about any other form of professional development that's provided for teachers?
Yeah.
Like, it's bizarre. So yeah, it's funny when the mask slips. That's all I'm saying.
All right, we've got 2 other clips to play from Mata, but don't panic. I noticed out there Mata thought that he might be in trouble. No, you're not in trouble, Mata. I was just talking about the show they named after you. So this is I've got 2 more clips, but they're only like 90 seconds each. This clip is that idea of the outcomes, and what I've written down is tangible versus intangible. And when this government talks about outcomes, all they talk about is tangible outcomes, meaning something that you can put a mark in a ledger. And I just think, I'm not saying that those aren't important, right? But they're not the be all and end all. And what this government is basically doing and saying is they are the be all and end all. And I don't think that's how you get a well-rounded student myself.
There was $30 million that we were spending. It's not that we're going to not do it again, because I've already said publicly we're going to recontract. What you saw in those results was that teachers were doing up to a level that was, and it says in the report, they were doing it more for their personal enjoyment than it was actually useful in the classroom. That's the first thing. 60% of them weren't finishing the course. You had a whole lot of provision in areas of New Zealand where there are not high numbers of Māori. Yes,
It looked like 40 to me.
percent of no, 60% were not in the research that I've got. But there was a whole lot of provision in areas of New Zealand where there are not high numbers of Māori students. It was a very poor contract that wasn't outcomes focused. There was
Now, there's
no
a really
reporting
important part
on
here
outcomes.
that not to, there was a really high number, there was not a high number of Māori students in certain areas. So what she's actually saying, what she's literally saying is, why would we need to teach these teachers te reo if there's no Maori kids in their school? That's what she's saying. Because she's putting together the $30 million, my words, being wasted on teachers who are in an area where there's, quote, not a high number of Māori students. And it's like, you know the country you live in, eh? And you know the education system you're the minister of, eh? You got that all? You got that? And you know how it's not just Māori that benefit from learning about Māori things and to be able to pronounce Māori correctly and to be comfortable in the Indigenous language of the country they live in, eh? But this is this tangible, intangible thing. This has got about 45 seconds to go. Do you want to say anything yet, Chewie? Should I push play?
No, let it roll.
When we recontract, I want to know, what are the outcomes for Māori students? I'm only putting resource in and holding myself to account so that I know that we are driving outcomes for Māori students in the mainstream, because
Tangible
I care about
outcomes.
closing the equity gap.
What does equity in education look like?
It means that when you come out as a student, doesn't matter if you're Māori or Pākehā or whatever, that you have the same opportunity to succeed. And I want to see, and I've seen it in schools, I've been up to schools in Northland who do structured maths and they've closed the gap. It means that they're Māori students. There's no difference between those students and the other students. I've been down in primary schools all around the country who say to me, Erica, within 2 years, our Māori students are reading at the same level as every other student. It's never happened before. Through structured literacy, structured maths, all of the resources of professional learning and development, those are results that I'm looking at and going, I want that in every single school in New Zealand. And that's why I have driven so hard to make sure that everything we're doing is about results, but not only in English medium, also in Te Reo Māori.
How do you...
And look, I think all of us, Chewie, would say if the reading is an improvement, that's amazing. Like, it's great. It's good to see kids being able to read better. My concern is twofold. One is that's not the only outcome that we want to see from students in school. That's my first thing. And the second thing is, if you're the kind of kid who maybe that structure doesn't work quite so well, like lots of kids in the 80s and before were, then you fall through the cracks and you get left behind. Because there doesn't seem to be any conversation about, you know, the neurodiverse kids out there whose brain doesn't quite function like that. And if this is the only way and this is the only mark and this is the only channel, because that's the vibe I get from what she's saying. Chewie.
Pat, do you believe that in only 2 years she's leveled the playing field?
No.
Like, have we ever seen a turnaround in an educational program that quick?
No.
No.
But
It's not
in fairness, she's saying at our school, the reading level had increased. Could that be possible? Yeah.
Oh, she's talking about seeing changes from one end of the country to the other.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, of course. I don't have facts or figures. And I just find that really, like, we've talked about this when National brought in national standards. The proof of the pudding in that isn't like in 1 year or 2 years. It's in 10 to 15 years you see the results of the changes that you've made. And in an education, like, I'm sure Erica's doing stuff here. Her minion, what's his name? Fellow with the pink tie. He's wanted to make some pretty dramatic changes to ECE teaching as well. Rema. So they're not even letting something bed in before they're trying to change something else as well that could have incredibly long-lasting effects on the education system.
Yeah. All right. We'll play the last clip now. And this references what I said right at the start. You heard in that very first clip that basically Kura kaupapa is the gold standard. That's what they said, outperforming the mainstream. And this is the clip where Erica Stanford gets it the wrong way around. And you hear in this clip, and Mihi kind of talks to it, maybe corrects is the right word, that she is talking about including kura kaupapa in what they're wanting to do with the mainstream. And the question is, if kura kaupapa, if we all agree, is the gold standard, why aren't you including the mainstream with the kura kaupapa rather than including the kura kaupapa with the Māori, with the mainstream? You know, like, why are you going, oh, they can come and join us, where if they're doing it better, why don't we go and join them? It's this exact conversation again about who gets to invite to the table. When it came to the treaty, just remember, Māori were the ones who built the table from the forests they lived in and invited the settlers to come to their table. In 2025, probably because we think we're a bigger population and we can outnumber Māori, we've taken the table, and now we're saying to Māori, oh, you can come and join in with us if you want. It's got that vibe of conversation around it. And I've probably ruined the clip because I've basically explained it all away, but let's have a listen.
What I can say is that in the kura kaupapa movement, we know they're getting great results. We know they're doing a good job. I have made sure that the first thing I said was to my property department, because as you know, often the schools are substandard and the buildings are not up to scratch. I need them in network planning because there is a huge amount of demand that we are not meeting. Ensure that we are keeping an eye on the watch lists. We're working with Te Ranganui and Ngakura a iwi. Make sure we know where the demand is and that we are meeting it as best we can. I want you to ring fence $100 million of property funding that we can continue to put into kura kaupapa. In fact, this morning I was announcing $100 million of extra money that we've managed to save through really good efficiencies we've found, and we included kura.
Sorry, just a side note. That's fucking terrifying. Government minister telling you, "Oh, we've just found another $100 million. We've ring fenced it. Where did that get cut? Where did that get cut from? No, for another day. For another day." That's terrifying.
Kaupapa in that announcement this morning for kura kaupapa getting new classrooms. So
well, it would make sense, right? Because they're gold star.
Well,
wouldn't it be the other way around? Is that actually you should be looking into the mainstream that's not delivering for Māori tamariki and using the gold star practice as kura kaupapa? It feels like it's a little bit the wrong way around.
Yep.
I mean, and you're talking about Ngāti Hawa, you said you don't know much about it, but I mean, it's important for you to know because it's a treaty settlement. It's your government apologising for the wrongs and the grievances of the past and offering an apology on behalf of poorer educational outcomes. So when does the left talk to the right hand, I guess, in the Crown?
Well, we are delivering, huge amounts for kura kaupapa.
Yeah.
And that is a bespoke, incredible model.
And maybe that's an option for Ngāti Hawa then, a kura kaupapa.
Well, that's something that they can talk to, no doubt, Ngakura iwi or Te Ranganui or all of the other independent organisations about. But I want you to know that I am focused on making sure that they have the resources they need, they have the buildings that they need,
totally,
and that they're at the table for discussions. And I believe I've got a really good relationship with kura kaupapa.
Yeah, I mean, so
there you go. So that's that conversation. Lovely to have Mihingarangi Forbes back on our show because legendary. But yeah, the whole point being, if this is the best way to do it, if this is getting the best outcomes, why aren't we modelling off them rather than them saying, well, they can come to the table. We make sure there's a space for them. No, let's go sit at their table. If they're doing it better and getting better outcomes, let's go sit at their table. Sheesh.
Isn't it hilarious? This isn't the only answer that they've got. Like, you'll have Seymour hold up charter schools as another answer, right? And it just turns out that the reason that charter schools are so good is that they get a fuckload more money per student.
That comes up in this.
So maybe that's the answer. Is that kura kaupapa comes to the table with more answers, and we throw more money at the students to get better results.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was a question like in the last 5 years, how many kura kaupapas have been built? And Erica said, I don't know. And Mihi said 2. And then started to talk about, you've given X amount of $100 million to a French language school in Auckland. What about some more kura kaupapa schools? Because it's a charter school. What about that? So that definitely is part of that conversation. We can't do it all. We can't watch it all. Go to RNZ and have a look at the whole conversation. It's really interesting all the way through. We can just give you a little sample.
I mean,
you can go check it out for yourself.
Just as an aside, because I mean, we comment on the Jellyfish Man, Luxon, and his particular way of speaking and how empty and corporate Scrabble board it is. I think the danger with Erica is that she's a much better speaker. Definitely sounds a lot more like Sunshine and Lollipops, but lots more believable than Luxon.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, you know what I think?
No less factual.
I think she's the next leader. I think she's the next leader of the National Party myself, but that's just me.
I think she has been extremely cunning to make sure that a lot of the shit going on in National comes nowhere near her.
They talked about school lunches in there a little bit as well, and of course she palmed that off on Rimmer, even though it's her, it's your department, it's your ministry. But she's done well not to have any of that shit stick to her. She's done very well in that. Arvid says, bet Erica this teachers get a free pass during school holidays. Bet Erica this teachers get a free pass during school holidays. Arvid also says, feels like this government and Erica think happiness equals money and results. Happiness is in culture and confidence and much more than just money. I just think that, you know, that there is a lot. I mean, if it's evidence that's how Māori kids in particular learn best is to include a whole bunch of other things like community and whānau and tikanga and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, let's follow that all the way to the end. It does. And like I said earlier, I'm not the kind of person that uses this phrase very much, but it does feel very much like a colonizer's conversation. Oh, you know, come over to our table. We'll show the savages how to do this properly. They're doing really well. In fact, they're doing better than you. Oh yeah, but they should still come over and join our table. It's just, it feels like, I mean, to get a freaking politician who's the head of a ministry that would just sit down and go, okay, how do we fucking do this? Experts, advisors, teachers, principals. Okay, what shall we do? Let's pretend we've got a blank slate. What do we need to get done? But all of them have got this ideological bent. They want it done a certain way. And then, you know, with these guys in tow, there seems to be a big business, a compass group or something at the end of their decisions. And or it's like, this is the narrow line that education works and there'll be a ton of kids in 20 years who have been left behind. Or it'll be, yes, you guys are getting great grades, but come and do it the white people's way. That's much better. I'm over it all.
Just cribbing stuff from an overseas country with no cultural considerations or you know, to just lift a program from another country because you think they've got a better idea and just plonking it in like it's a Lego piece. Yeah. It doesn't work. Like, no, and again, it's that cultural cringe that we seem to fall into of like, oh, we're a small country, we can't possibly do things ourselves. How embarrassing.
Even though on the other hand, we always scream to the rooftops how much we start and invent and begin, but we can't do things on our own. People used to talk to me on Talkback about other little countries, and this is what I'd say to them. If it ever came up in conversation, oh, but look at the crime stats in Singapore, we should do that here. I was like, yeah, but to get the outcome, my word this time, that Singapore gets in those areas, you have to actually bring the whole Singaporean society here, because that doesn't stand alone by itself. Right? Their crime rates are a result of how the whole community works. And would you like to live in that community? Because if you want Singaporean crime stats, then you need to have everything around them, the whole society, the way it's run, the way it's taxed, everything to run like that. But they don't see it that way. And it's the same as what you're saying, Chewie. You can't just plonk from this country in here unless you bring the whole society where that particular thing works in there. So it's just nonsense. It's nonsense.
I mean, it's down to stuff like how our teachers are trained. It's down to the demographics of the classrooms that they're teaching. It's our responsibilities under Treaty of Waitangi. It's all of these things. You can't just say, for an example, look at how Singapore does things.
Yeah.
And go, oh, we're going to take their maths program as an example. It just doesn't work.
No.
Like, you have to adapt.
Last chat before we move on. Kiwi Bird, Māori built the table, agreed the Crown could sit at it. Then the Crown stole the table and said, here, have some crumbs. Be grateful. Yeah, I mean, as soon as you start thinking about it the opposite way around, you can see why there's a grievance there by one part of the agreement that they all signed. Sorry, Chewie.
I love that analogy of whose table we're at. It changes people's mindset really well. I want to touch on something like we've had teachers in the chat here sort of mention every time we talk about education that one of the issues is when kids start school, often they're behind, because I think the way that our schooling system is set up is still around the basis of there is a full-time parent at home all the time. reading books to them and that sort of thing. And we know that that's not how that works these days. People have to have 2 jobs to maintain their mortgage or to pay their landlord what the landlord deserves. So early childhood education is vital. That seems to be the obvious fact that everybody is missing. It is not just a case of like, oh, mum needs a break, so we put the kid in daycare or kindergarten or that sort of thing. It needs to be a more I guess, driven form of education. And at the same time as we could be acknowledging that fact, Seymour is looking at dropping standards for ECE teachers. Does that seem counterintuitive to you?
Sort of does, and it's probably a perfect time, Chewie, for the introduction to the story that we didn't have advertised that we thought we'd talk about, because under the previous government there was 20 hours free childcare. And this government came in and they said, absolute poppycock. I think that's my government voice from now on. I think that's what I've decided. We're going to do Family Boost. And guess what? Family Boost is failing.
The Finance Minister is vowing she'll put things right.
I'll say this as well. Nothing will get me more pissy than watching the Finance Minister basically go, no, it's not really working. Oh, we can do better. This is you don't get that grace. Sorry, you made some very big changes and very big promises. If you want to see me blow my frickin' stack, you'll play this off as a minor inconvenience that doesn't really matter, and you'll sort it out, which is exactly what you're about to see.
Right, and make changes to the government's Family Boost program, which is struggling to live up to expectations. Nicola Willis's announcement coming just hours after Labor branded the scheme a flop, with only half of the...
Very important final sentence in this report as well, if I remember correctly. Very important, which we'll come back to.
Expected number of families receiving payments so far. Here's senior political reporter Benedict Collins.
Family Boost was the government's plan to make early childhood education a bit more affordable for around 100,000 Kiwi families.
It's a harder trick than the last one.
But uptake's been slow, and very few have received the maximum $75 a week.
They also promised that 100,000 families would be able to access Family Boost. Less than half have been able to receive that, or half have been able to receive that.
Early this afternoon, Labor was putting in the boot.
That was important as well, what Barb said. Less than half have been able to access that. So we're not saying that, only half have chosen to uptake this, which is a bit of a spin that some put on it. Less than half have been able to access that. Very few, it's $150 a fortnight, remember that? Very few have access to $75 a week. $75 a week rather than 20 hours of free childcare.
It's quite clear that their policy has failed.
So we asked the Finance Minister if Labor's criticism was on the money.
I'm surprised it's not reaching more families, because we were advised it would reach as many as 100,000 this year.
How many families is it reaching?
It's reached about 50,000 families so
half
far.
of what you're thinking.
Yeah, and so we want to make changes to the scheme to make sure.
So we were wrong. So we've made an error. We're sorry, New Zealand. We're sorry, parents of young children. We fucked up, and we are going to fix it. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa.
That more families can benefit from it.
The government's now getting advice on how to make sure that more Family Boost money gets out the door.
What do you think you can do in terms of tweaking it to make sure that more Kiwi families can get their fair share of this money here?
We're looking at things like the application process, also the income thresholds, whether families who have more than one child in early childhood education can make more than one claim. There's a number of things we could do to make this more accessible.
And that's exactly what Labor has been calling for.
Fall on your sword, make it easier for families to access this, because we're in a cost of living crisis and this is what families need right now.
The Finance Minister is hoping to announce exactly what changes will be made to Family Boost after the budget. Benedict Collins.
After the budget, Chewie. The last sentence in it. After the budget. So there's a budget coming up in exactly 1 month from 2 days ago. And this balls up that is not working is going to be talked about after the budget. I actually think that's a really important sentence that wasn't given enough kind of heat.
This was something that they campaigned on. This was going to be heaps better in a variety of ways for more families than whatever Labor were doing. I think we said at the time it sounds pointlessly complicated and admin intensive for the families, and therefore people weren't going to be able to access the money that that would have helped them out. It wasn't going to be immediate, so it wasn't going to help them out with the cost of living crisis as well. This is an abortion of a program, and Willis there just wants to blame the IRD. You know, oh, we were advised this, we were advised that. You were advised lots of things, Nicola. You were advised that it wasn't going to work. You've made a complicated system that has failed families in a clear monetary way that they will notice, and hopefully they'll remember next election.
Rua MD says 249 families. I'm just Googling that because I'd like to be able to confirm that. I've got a couple of conversations going on online. I haven't seen the story, but if that's the case, from 100,000 families have access, $150 a week, the big massive build up, they thought 20,000 would get would get the full amount, $75 a week, and it's $249. You know, if it was the other way around, if it was Labor, right, and National were in opposition, they would be calling for heads to roll for this kind of terrible uptake.
And as I mentioned, this is the solution to a problem that primary teachers are saying is a solution, that the education needs to start earlier, so when they hit primary school, they've already hit those markers that primary needs them to be at. This would have been a very clear program that the government could go, right, well, we need to make sure that people are able to access early childhood care for these children, so everybody hits the ground running when they hit primary school, that your primary school teachers aren't playing catch up with different demographics. But they haven't done that. They have made a system that is complex, and it's just boosting the profit margin for ECE operators like the Wright Family Foundation. It's
you know when I break
crazy.
into a sentence with a new story, we've had confirmation. Nicola Willis confirms Family Boost eligibility to be expanded. Because it failed, so it's going to be expanded. You mean corrected? I think the word you're looking for is corrected.
Okay, you're just going to make it easier for families that they don't.
I've got an idea. How about they just give every family? They just give every family 20 hours of free childcare. Would that be easier? That could be easier.
It certainly sounds like it'd be less admin for the families, and it'd put less barriers in front of families. So, like you've got to keep all your invoices and that sort of thing, and then submit them quarterly.
Yeah.
How about just like you said, Pat? Just give them a set amount. They don't have to do anything apart from send their kids to ECE.
Government data shows only 249 families have consistently been getting the maximum $75 a week. See how the fucking media, sorry, you're going to have a blimmin' burl at the moment as well. Fucking media are now calling it $75 a week. You guys were so happy to call it $150 a fortnight in the lead up to the election. And now you start calling it $75 a week? Piss off. Have consistently been getting the maximum $75 a week ECE rebate, well short of the 21,000 IRD initially estimated.
No, that's a very simple and easy to understand. Like anybody could have made that mistake. That's
it's pretty close.
That's
it's
a
only
rounding
10%
error.
Yeah, it's only 10% difference. 249 to 21,000. Yes,
Like,
I
go to type in on a calculator. And instead put my whole fist through the desk, and then try and eat a piece of drywall for lunch. It's a simple, everyday mistake that the finance minister is carrying there.
Thank you, Nikki No Boats. Available in the merch store. Thank you, Nikki No Boats, for your
Nikki No Boost.
Nikki No Boost. Look at you. These jokes write themselves. Speaking of jokes. Brian Tamaki, really good series on TV. And I haven't got all the way through it yet, so I won't give it that much of credit. No, I will. Good looking series on TV.
This is why John Campbell's been so quiet lately.
Yeah, I think
He's
so.
He's been busy.
He's been watching thousands of hours of Brian Tamaki. He's aged 17 years. So on TVNZ Plus, I think they call it, on the news page, there's a series here of these. I've watched the first 2 episodes. I think there's only 5 episodes, so it's an easy watch. And as you can see, like 14 minutes, 13 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes. I'm going to play you a clip from the first one. The first episode is called something like The Church That Women... Oh, there we go. The Whistleblowers Terrified of Their Own Church. I'm just going to play you about 60 seconds of this, and then we'll actually play the one news story from tonight as well. But this is a former member of Destiny Church who has I think it's a protection order out against her former partner, who was one of the people who started up the Man Up group, which is the anti-violence group, who was beating her up, according to this testimony, whilst he was a part of Man Up. Now, look, we are fair here. And you might say, you know, there's a person, okay, fair. So if I was going to say that would happen, there's dirtbags everywhere. The truth of this pudding would be how the church then handled this member of their Man Up group beating his partner. And that's when they get tarred with this brush, I'm afraid.
I asked if I could speak to somebody, and if what I speak about was going to be kept in confidentiality. I told them that my then partner was beating me. He was tormentive to our kids, and they just asked, the one question I was asked was, is he using?
The recurring theme from the women I spoke to about Man Up was that healing the men came first. That Man Up did work sometimes. Some men have stopped being violent. But when it didn't work, women and sometimes children were left at risk.
So that's what I was going to show you from the actual episode, because now we're going to play the story, because the story actually features a bit about the episode as well. So here is the one news story from tonight, featuring the investigative journalism of John Marvellous Campbell.
A former Destiny Church member has spoken out against the church's Man Up group, which is billed as an anti-violence program. But a woman on the receiving end of domestic abuse at the hands of one of its former members says she was blamed for being beaten. Chief Correspondent John Campbell reports for this One News in-depth investigation.
You know, just like Jesus wanted them to do. You blame the victim. That's what you do.
I was labelled the problem. I was the one at fault for triggering the man.
How powerless did that make you feel?
F***ing worthless as.
Tiahi left Destiny after repeatedly being beaten by her former partner. He was a founding member of the church's Man Up anti-violence program. What do you think Man Up is?
Bullshit.
Is it an anti-violence program? An effective, meaningful anti-violence program?
No.
And I said, it's a great job what you're doing, but I want you to storm the library they're in.
Now, just a little pat on our back, Chewie. You will notice there is a fair bit of footage about to come up, which is the footage we showed after charges were brought against 7 members of Man Up. And this is still on, as far as I know, YouTube, this clip, which is the day after they stormed the Te Atatu Library. Brian Tamaki on stage acknowledging he told them to storm the library.
And shut it down.
Te Atatu Library, West Auckland in February. 7 people are now facing common assault charges.
I don't believe that Man Up stops violence. I do not believe that. Even if in some contexts they stop beating their partners, they are now put in a position where they are trained and they are taught to be violent against other members of communities.
There was a lot of lies of violence. That's not true. There might have been some pushy-bargy, but hey, I'd smack somebody over that's going to pervert my little child in a room.
Brian Tamaki and Destiny Church declined to answer any of our questions, even in writing.
This government's watching me. I'm a dangerous man.
It's not safe. It's not healthy. You know, we should never live in fear of something, particularly when it comes to our God.
Were there times you told Destiny what your ex was doing, and as a result of you telling Destiny, your ex would beat you up again?
Yeah. Yep.
Under a protection order, she lives in hiding and would only speak with her face blurred.
Many times I went there to ask for help to leave or have him removed. Most times they were looking at me as if I was the demonic one. I was the one, I was the problem.
The victim was the problem?
Yep.
I've spoken to more than 20 current and former Destiny members as part of an investigation into the church, its public anger and its charity status. All were terrified to share their story.
Episode 2, they talk a lot about the charity status. They talk about the charitable status, and there's some wording in the to be a registered charity that you have to abide by a certain standard, a public standard. And they do this really interesting thing in episode 2 where they show all it was like 42 charities or something at one stage, and now there's only 9 left. And a lot of the churches, like from different parts of the country, either haven't filed any returns because they show it from the company's registrar, or it's probably the charity's registrar actually, or they haven't filed any returns since like 2019. So according to this series, in episode 2, you see that Destiny is not being forthcoming with the financials of their charities, and they've either let the charities go into dissolution or they've asked to be removed from the registered charities rather than, the implication is, rather than declare what their incomes were, because there's no monies attached to the side. It's probably got about 30 seconds, this.
So this is an anti-violence group that people are genuinely afraid of?
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Absolutely.
Police and corrections are no longer working with Man Up, and the church's charity status is under investigation.
So the harm that Destiny Church does is not just a harm to individuals. It's actually a harm to entire communities, and it's a harm to this entire country. And we shouldn't be tolerating it. We should not be tolerating it.
There you go. Then it goes into a conversation in the studio. There you go, Chewie. I know you probably haven't seen any of that yet, but your thoughts, sir?
My understanding of the Man Up program is that it's really about anchoring the man as the head of the household, the supreme power in the household, in the same way as that Brian and or God is the supreme power in Destiny Church. Now, if you're going to condense that much positioning, like it's not about a partnership in the house. The man is the top dog. So if your house is in disorder, then you need to put it right. And that seems to be the core takeaway here. It's a very misogynistic place to be. And when you're already dealing with damaged people that have used violence in the past to correct mistakes, or is seen as a tool to achieve your goals, then what are you going to get? Like I've interacted with people from Destiny Church and the Man Up program, and the yardstick for getting either threats, laughable threats to be fair, that they were going to come round to my house, but it's still there, the implied threat of violence in their own home with no one watching, and a church that encourages them. What do you think you're going to get? My personal view is that if anybody takes out their shortcomings, their frustration out on their kids and their partner, is an absolute dog shit human being. And that seems to be I guess, a prerequisite for being in Destiny. Like, how can you sit there and hear these messages and go, yeah, no, this is cool. This is cool. It's clear from this interview that the church knew that this was going on.
That's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it, because we've talked about this in the last few weeks about other religious entities looking at the 2x2s. It's not, this is going to sound strange, but it's not that there can't be an abuser in an organization, because organizations are made up of people, and some people abuse. It's really about how that organization reacts when that person is outed. And it seems from this story, it's a bit like that saying, Chewie, about, you know, if there's one Nazi sitting at a table with 11 other people who know he's a Nazi or something, then you've got 12 Nazis sitting at the table. Well, I would suggest if there's one abuser sitting at the table, and you don't ostracize them, get them out of the table immediately, then you've at the very least got 11 enablers sitting with an abuser at the table. If not, the fair analogy would be 11 abusers. So to me, it's like you're always going to have awful people in every organization. When the organization then rolls with the awful person and not with the person who's been abused, then that organization is as bad, if not worse, because they continue it. I
think Destiny doing their little gang fucking cosplay with former gang members that they've recruited in prison, and then going, oh yeah, all the problems are fixed, is naive at best. But I think it is because Brian wanted a motorcycle gang full of gang members that he can use as his own personal toughs.
He calls them their soldiers, and I think it might be episode 1, talks a lot about the militarized sound, and we heard that with the Te Atatu Library, my soldiers, my generals, and that's becoming more and more part of the lingo within Destiny Church at the moment. So the reporting says. So yeah, you're right, Chewie, and it's
and look, that's language that the gangs use as well. They've got foot soldiers and sergeant at arms and all of these sort of things. So he is aping that structure. And at what point do you go, oh, this is an homage to gangs, and then just go, no, bro, you're a gang. You're a gang with church attached.
Well, but equally, one of the reasons you ban gang patches, one of the criteria is if they're a criminal entity. So how close are we to designating criminal establishments as a part of Destiny? Therefore, can that gang be put on the gang patch law? I mean, like how long does that take? Anyway.
Yep.
Anything in the chat that you particularly want to get to? We are going to wrap up now, but that's pretty much the show for today.
I am going to leave with Peter's comment here, because I remember having the same reaction as well. In the Auckland War Memorial Museum, there is a hallway full of marble panels with soldiers who died in the various campaigns that New Zealand has fought in from the Auckland region. The thing that, for me, that was an absolute gut punch was at the end of this long hallway full of very small names. There's a panel there that's empty.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, let this wall never be filled. And I remember the first time that I saw that rocked me. So that's what I take into Anzac Day. Here in Dunedin, in my pocket, it's always been in my pocket ever since I went overseas in 2015 and went to Gallipoli. I have a little box, and in that box there is a stone from the beach in Gallipoli, a stone from the fields of the Messines Ridge in France, a stone from Crete, and some shrapnel that I pulled out of a trench wall in Gallipoli as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I always had that with me at my dawn service.
Jargo, act. Yeah. I thought about that as well. Okay, big reminder, just one last time, sorry to beat you around the head with it, that we've got a special running through the weekend of our Buffer Rainbow Library Rainbow Drag t-shirts and hoodies on, and I'm going to keep it open until the weekend. There's the sage colour, there's the sky blue or pale blue, pale sky, I think it's called, colour as well. I've dropped the prices by 10%. Apologies again for not reminding you that they were available. They will be going away next week, and I'm already apologising in advance for the person who messages me next Thursday going, oh, when are those rainbow buffers coming back? I'm going to do it over the weekend. I'll keep it open for a bit longer, and then they will indeed go away again. So if you're interested, get in quick, get in early. Chewie, my friend, do you want to leave us with anything towards Anzac Day? I know it's a big day for you.
I think I just did.
We're going to head off. You did that? Did your little thing? I know. Didn't you tell us last year that if you go to Anzac Cove now and you walk around there, you can still pick up and find pieces? Like, didn't you say someone that you were with picked up a piece of bone or something?
Yeah, it had recently rained. That was me. I just brushed my hands across a trench wall. That's where I got the shrapnel that I carry around. But yeah, you could see that there were flakes of bone in there. And I recently read a story
110 years ago.
Yep. There's sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
While you're looking for it, I'll just put Brother Monk's comment up because I thought it was perfect about Brian Tamaki. God would be so proud. Yep, very good. Hear you. Yes.
Hang on, I found it. It's coming. Yeah, so this happened this year. There's a New Zealand Defence Force team over there that had wildfires on the Gallipoli Peninsula and heavy rains. Yeah. And that's all that it takes, basically, is heavy rain will bring up human remains to the surface. And at this point, you don't know whether it's Turkish remains or, Allied remains, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a moving story that it's still there. Like, you go to Gallipoli, you see how close the trenches are, you read the stories of, like, the story of on the Australian side of the Battle of Lone Pine always infuriates me because it's just so dumb and only the way that World War II battles can be. Waves and waves of men running at entrenched machine gun positions because they're told to.
Well,
it's still there.
If you're going to remember it tomorrow, we should probably let people go so they can get to bed, get up for their dawnies if that's what they're going to do.
Straight to bed.
However you commemorate it tomorrow. There's no show tomorrow night. The kids have got a night off doing stuff. They're probably out drinking and partying like young people do, Chewie. No, they're not. They've got things on, serious things on as well. And me and Chewie will be back Monday night at 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Until then, whānau, be safe.
Cheers, man.
Help us settle a debate, whether it be thoughtful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that we need to be wary of. Like the rich have the hand out for rewards, while the many have to work out what they can afford. And the rest of us ain't paying attention, or maybe have questions we're too worried to mention. Other media is still dwelling on trivial facts, vetting peas from the rice and the mice from the rats, and picking and choosing a war puff to run, and linking ourselves with the hill to die on. It's gotta come down to a welcoming vibe, with an A and a self and a higher in mind. All heavily, neither this way or that, and we'll be analyzed by Chewie and Pat. With the evil in the world trying to mess with your head, and you're sitting on the couch, you're thinking chivalry's dead. Each night, 2 nights, they're gonna sing you to bed. It's Big Hairy News.
Nothing else to say, really, team. All the best for the weekend. Stay safe through the weekend. Be well, whatever you're doing tomorrow, and we'll catch you on Monday night. Anything to wrap with, Chewie?
Go to bed. Got to get up
Go to
early
bed.
tomorrow.
See you at 6. All right, team. All the best. Speak soon. Be well. See you Monday.
Cheers, fam.